Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of Social Conversations. I'm your host, Ishan, and today we're joined by Ishan Singh, an art therapist by profession. What we have here in front of us today is how a mock-up of an art therapy session might look like, and Kay will be guiding me through it today, and you guys can watch. So, how do we get started?
Okay, so welcome to the art therapy session. So these are actually the materials that are available for you to use, and you can feel free to use any materials that's available.
Okay.
And you can start anytime you like.
All right. So I just draw whatever I'm feeling, or
Yeah, anything that you like to put on the paper.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is this how it usually goes down when a patient walks in the room? You tell them to
Yes.
draw as if.
Yeah, I'll just invite them to make any kind of artwork they are comfortable with.
Okay.
Actually, usually they will start with any medium that they are more familiar with.
Oh, all right. So that's why you have paints and markers.
Yeah, so I have a mixture of materials, whether it's dry materials, like we classify the materials between dry and wet materials. So the dry materials like pencils, charcoal, color pencils are the dry materials, whereas the wet materials will encompass like paint, clay, and such. Yeah.
Okay, so do the dry and wet materials symbolize different things, or is that just like to give the patients a variety of choice?
They do tell us different things based on what the client chooses. So dry materials do offer more control to the client,
right?
Because it's easier to manipulate. Whereas for wet materials, it offers more fluidity.
Okay.
So the client has less control over it, and there's more opportunities to make mess with wet materials, and those are other indications. So for instance, when we see children who have previous trauma, sometimes we see them making a lot of mess in the sessions, and that's their way of getting the mess inside them out.
Oh, okay, right, that makes sense. So you, instead of them having to convey it through words, they can convey it through art, and that might be easier for them.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so I guess I'll get started on this, and maybe you can just maybe walk me through like a process of how sessions usually look like, and is this really a one session thing, or does it happen over a period of time?
Okay, so usually for art therapy, it's a long process whereby the first few sessions would be really getting to know the client, getting the client to be comfortable with me, with the session, with the room, and to be able to use the materials. So usually I offer a trial of a few sessions for the client to try it out and see whether it helps him or her.
Okay.
And then after the initial period whereby they get comfortable with the session and the materials and myself, then that's where the real work starts.
Oh, okay.
So based on what is being drawn, what is being expressed, then we'll work on whatever issues that they come presenting with.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes we may not work on the issues directly because art therapy is quite a non-verbal process.
Right.
So sometimes we let the art do the work.
Okay.
And a lot of the work may not be verbal. Yeah. And then when it comes to a point of time whereby the client feels ready to stop and we decide to finish the therapy, then we'll decide on an end date.
Right.
And then we'll plan for the last session whereby they would do a last piece of work. Right. Usually we'll do it together, like have a joint piece of work, whereby we can remember the time that we had together, and then they will bring back all their artworks.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So every session they make a new piece of artwork for you, and you get to see a progression. Is that how it works?
Yeah. And they may not make new artworks in every session. Sometimes it may be a continuation from the previous session. So I get to keep all their artworks so that they may be able to review all the artworks from previous sessions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then the final artwork, do you look at it and then decide whether they're fine to go ahead, or is that is it finalized beforehand that this will be their last piece, or do you review it? as per se, or?
We discuss when would be the last session. So
Okay.
we will do a last piece of work together, and then the client might decide to take home that piece of work, or do we split it into half, or would he or she like me to keep it?
Okay.
So it depends. It depends on the client what he or she wants. Yeah, because sometimes they might want to leave a part of themselves, and which is represented through their artwork with me.
Yeah.
For me to remember him or her. And for some of them, it's really important that we do keep them in mind.
Okay.
And that's also part of the therapy. Yeah. And the part about ending being planned is also very important, because we want to prevent any sudden closure in the sessions, in the therapy, to kind of re-traumatize them, because sometimes some of the clients, they have experiences whereby people suddenly leave, like they have sudden losses.
Right.
And we don't want to re-traumatize that and re-trigger that kind of experience in the therapy. So we always aim to plan the endings.
So I know, like, in society in general, there's quite a bit of stigma around mental health and therapy in general. So when you see someone walk in, or when you see someone considering art therapy, do they come in with some preconceived notions or misconceptions already in their mind, which you have to clarify before you can actually get started?
Yeah, usually the most common misconception that people have about art therapy is that therapists are able to interpret the drawings right from the start, or based on the image itself. That's not true. We work with a few hypotheses usually, so we look at the artwork and we try to kind of have a few meanings behind it, but we also would check with the client, like what is the meaning behind their artwork.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then it also depends a lot on the relationship that we have with the client. Therefore, it's a long-term process. It's not a once-off instance whereby we are able to look at the art and interpret what it actually means. Because a lot of times when we look at it and think what we know it means, it's often based on our own experiences. And it will be our own meanings for the image rather than from the client. Yeah, so that's really not accurate of art therapy. Another common worry that clients have is that you have to be really good in art to be able to use art therapy. That's also not the case. I often tell parents that as long as the client is willing to use art materials, that's good enough.
So when, like, a patient is actually drawing, do you expect them to consciously be thinking about what they've gone through or what they're going through, or does that not matter?
No, yeah, it doesn't matter at all, because a lot of what is being put out is unconscious.
Okay, right.
Yeah, and most of the time it is. Some clients will be able to reflect on their artwork, but some may not, and that's fine.
Okay. So in a case where a patient might have difficulty opening up or telling you about what their artwork is about, in that case, do you tend to go by your own judgment, or do you just take time in getting them to feel comfortable about sharing?
I would say probably I do both, a little bit of both. I will look at the art, I would ask them, and if they don't want to share, it's fine as well. And I might have my own tentative hypothesis about it before I let them feel comfortable enough to share. Yeah, so I do a little bit of both.
Is it quite on like a case-by-case basis? Is everyone's experience different? Is that what you found out?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, and I see a range group because I see children and adolescents. So they use the sessions quite differently.
So, what do you think really like separates art therapy from other forms of therapy?
I think the main thing about art therapy, together with other expressive therapies such as music therapy, is that it accesses the nonverbal parts of our brain. So you don't really need to talk very much. We are able to also access the more primitive parts of the brain. So that's why it's very good for people who have undergone some traumatic experiences, whereby sometimes they are not able to talk about these experiences, but they are able to put it out on paper through art or music and stuff like that. So that's the main thing that sets it apart from traditional psychotherapy, where talking is required. Yeah.
Right. It's been very insightful. I've definitely found out a lot which I didn't know about art therapy. I'm not quite sure what I've drawn myself, but it's something to get started with, I guess. So I hope you guys learned something from this. Mental therapy is obviously a very important issue, and the stigma around it in society is a problem which we need to tackle with, and it obviously starts with all of us. So thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for watching and listening. I hope this has been an enriching experience for you as well. This has been your host, Ishan, and I hope to see you in another episode of Social Conversations.